Last month I discovered a new trick which finally lets us skip the Agata River Bridge in New Game. I named it Half Blue Skip after Half Blue, who did a lot of the research into Walking While Talking, of which this is the first real application. This trick has a lot of knock-on effects in the route, so there are many segments which have to be considered when determining the overall time save of this trick. In the top left you'll see segments from the route with Half Blue Skip, and in the top right will be corresponding segments from the pre-existing route. Below each segment will be a short description of the start and end point of that segment. Between many segments are parts of the run which are unchanged by Half Blue Skip, which are denoted by a fixed duration of a black screen with text showing what was omitted. The comparison isn't 100% accurate, as each of these segments was recorded in real time on console, but it should give a solid estimate of the time save achievable by humans. First, you'll see a comparison without commentary. Then you'll see just the segments with Half Blue Skip in full screen, alongside commentary explaining the differences. As part of Half Blue's skip, we need to feed some hares an herb feed bag. While there are pots scattered around each area with guaranteed feed bag drops, there aren't any close to our path which contain herbs, so it saves a few seconds to buy one on the way out of Kamiki. Because we skip several fights in the early game, we need to pick up a few treasures to have enough yen for double jump later on. When all the options are considered, the fastest combination of treasures includes this rat statue in the cave you blow up during the Cherry Bomb tutorial. For the glitch itself, we have a few objectives to take care of in Agata. We start with Waka Skip. After Waka Skip, if you have less than 5,500 yen by this point, or if you're worried about losing a lot of yen in any of the fights between here and Double Jump, you should pick up this incense burner in the treasure bud. After that, we immediately go to the cabbage ball and start pushing it up the hill towards Sleepy the Bear. Note that if you didn't get the herb feed bag earlier, you can smash this pot to get one on the way to the ball. This part is really obnoxious, and you can lose a lot of time if the ball doesn't want to roll the right way. It definitely takes practice and a little luck to do this quickly, but you can make it a little easier by making the ball ride the wall in some parts. Throughout this, you also have to be careful not to hit the trigger for the Waka 1 fight, which is still active and has roughly this shape. Once the ball is at the top of the hill, we need to carefully position it by the torch here. Power slash the torch and carefully push the ball into a position by the rock and to the right of the slashed torch. As soon as you cut the torch, you have 10 in-game seconds before the torch respawns and, if the ball is positioned correctly, pushes it into Sleepy's trigger. You don't want it to be too far to the left or too far from the rock, since then the ball won't hit the trigger. If you're worried about that, you can move the ball away and try positioning it again. You especially don't want to push the ball too far right, since then it will hit Sleepy's trigger and you'll have to reset. Unfortunately, I haven't come up with any real setup for this, and the precision of it means you'll probably be resetting a large fraction of your runs to it. Once the ball looks like it's in a good spot, immediately position Ami in front of the rocks so that the examine prompt for the bench appears in the bottom left. Aim the camera downwards like this. We're going to perform a brush adventure to clip the camera through the ground and navigate it over to the cursed patch near Kokari and Karude's hut. Time spent in the brush doesn't count toward the torch timer, so we want to do this quickly. A large portion of this brush adventure is completely blind, so I found a setup to make it work consistently without wasting much time. I recommend you practice this by itself so you can do it flawlessly under pressure. Starting with the camera pointed down, like I said earlier, drag the brush to the bottom of the screen, rebrush and drag to the bottom again, then point the camera up as far as it will go. Rebrush, then drag to the bottom, and repeat until the camera clips slightly through the ground. Stop moving the brush and point the camera down, then rotate to the right until the edge of the black box at the top of the screen lines up with the black outline of the ink pot. The alignment here matters. If the black box meets the ink pot too high up, the camera will clip back in bounds during the next part, which will force you to redo the whole brush adventure setup. If they meet too low, the brush adventure will still work, but you might have to move for longer to get into a good position at the end. Once the camera is aligned correctly, rebrush and drag the brush to the right. Keep an eye on the edge of the brush model to make sure it doesn't go into the top or bottom corners. At the same time, use your timer to count out around 12 to 15 seconds. Once that time is up, rotate the camera up and to the right until the level geometry appears again. Aim the camera so that the middle of the screen is pointed in bounds but not too far away. Try to point it towards a spot close to the cursed patch, though you'll just have to intuit where that is since you don't have a good visual marker. Rebrush one more time and the camera should snap inbound somewhere close to the cursed patch. If the cursed patch is not in view and close by, you'll need to move and rotate the camera a bit more until it is. This technique is called a BA snap, and it's the same thing that's used at the end of Waka Skip. Essentially, as we're dragging the camera, a point in front of the camera, which I call the focus, is moving away from it. When we rebrush, if there's solid collision between the focus and the camera is snapped towards the focus so that it is in front of the collision. We use this to our advantage here to reduce the total movement needed. Once we have the camera in position, let go of the brush and quickly press the bark button to examine the bench which Ami is still standing in front of. While you have this dialogue up, the torch timer is still running and the cabbage is still moving, but Sleepy's cutscene is stalled from starting. Keep this dialogue open for a few seconds until you're confident 10 seconds have elapsed outside the brush since power slashing the torch. You can look at your timer, but you'll have to make an estimate on how long it took you for the initial setup for getting the cabbage and Ami in position. You don't want to wait too long, as it wastes time, and there's a slim chance that the cabbage will roll back out of Sleepy's trigger, causing the trick to fail. We can then hold down the brush button, then hold the dig button to clear the text boxes. This allows us to use the brush in the frame before the cutscene activates. If we bloom the cursed patch, the two cutscenes start at the same time, interrupting each other. You'll know the trick worked if Sleepy's cutscene begins to play, followed by the cursed patch. Mash the skip button to ensure that the cursed patch restoration cutscene is skipped, or else you won't be able to feed the hares for some reason. The way this works is that Sleepy's cutscene is actually made up of two cutscenes, between which the player's control of Ami is normally removed. However, the cursed patch restoration cutscene stops the second part from playing and teleports Ami. We then have control of the camera, brush, and menu, but Ami still won't respond to the analog stick. We can fix that by going through yet another cutscene. Fortunately, restoring the cursed patch reveals some hares which we can feed. Rotate the camera and bloom these two treasure buds. This will attract the hares toward Ami, in range for us to feed them from the fan menu. For some reason, just pressing the bark button to feed them does nothing, even though we get the prompt. Skip the feeding cutscene and you should have full control restored. Quickly tackle and grab the small exorcism slip and wooden bear from those two buds. Then tackle jump into the water. While you're swimming across, bloom this other treasure bud to get an Infinity Stone. Dash over to the river. Jump into the river and swim across. The whole setup earlier with Sleepy's cutscene puts the game into a weird cutscene storage state, where the game is waiting for a specific cutscene to start, and so won't let certain others activate, including the cutscene for Ami getting swept away by the rapids. This turns the river into normal water we can swim across. The cutscene storage state can be cancelled by certain other interactions, including day-night transitions, so be careful not to wait around too long. In Taka, the shopping changes a bit. We have to sell the Inkfinity Stone, but be careful not to sell your Exorcism Slip since we need it for the Blue Imp fight in Kusa. Sell any treasure you have, and buy 4 meat feed bags and 3 Steel Fist sake. At the start of the Waka fight, since we didn't do Tsura Ruins, we have to upgrade our ink twice so that we have 5 ink pots for the digging minigame in Sasa. For the Blue Imp fight, we don't have enough yen to afford a stronger slip, so we have to use the small one we got in Agata, then hit the Blue Imp 8 times with Divine Retribution. There's unfortunately some RNG here in where it spawns and whether you can get the combo off cleanly. When leaving Seian after talking to Himiko, we have to grab the medium exorcism slip in Rao's building to use on the Wind Nose fight in North Rio, since we didn't buy one in Taka Pass. I don't show it here, but in North Rio our shopping also changes a bit. We buy 4 mermaid coins, 1 fish feed bag, 1 small slip, and 4 SFS. If you have more than 29k before the shopping, you can buy a medium slip instead of a small one to save about 2 seconds later on. Interestingly, because we never did the first round of fishing with Kokari, when we return to Agata to fight Ume, the game actually starts the first fishing minigame with the giant salmon instead of the Whopper, saving a bit of time. After the minigame, the game pretends as if it was the Whopper, so we still fight Ume, but we also get the Tsura key. After Ume, we can go directly to Tsura Ruins with the key. Make sure not to drop it, since you will have to reload the map to get it back if you do. Also, be careful of Demon Scrolls, since it will be night at this point due to the Crescent tutorial. Within Tsura Ruins is where a lot of the time save comes from. Compared to the route without Half Blue Skip, we have Double Jump, Fire Burst, and an extra small or medium slip, and we don't have to fight the Spider Queen. We start with fairly normal movement for skipping the intro cutscene, since Double Jump doesn't really help here. When we get to this tunnel part, we can move a bit more fluidly with Double Jump. We can skip the fight with the Butt Ogre by doing a very precise tackle bounce onto this ledge, a trick called Single Skip. This generally takes a few tries, but it saves 24 seconds, so it's still worth going for. We can also skip the double Butt Ogre fight by doing a double jump air tackle with somewhat precise timing. This is called Double Skip, and it's similar to the jump off Arahime's forehead in Oni Island, but a bit more lenient. That said, you only get one shot, and it's slow to mess up, so you should practice it thoroughly. We can still get up onto the ledge by tackle bouncing a bit farther from the corner than usual. The bridge collapse sequence can be skipped by double jumping around the trigger, this being called Sneeze Skip. After Blockhead, we can use Double Jump to climb this room a few seconds faster by going around the middle instead of the outside. For the first fight in the Triple Gate Room, we can use Fire Burst to open the Blood Ogre without having to use Bloom, while simultaneously killing the red imps with AoE damage. Try not to run out of ink here, but you can upgrade to 6 ink pots if you need to. Before going into the second gate, switch to outer camera and point it all the way up at roughly this angle. Drag the brush to the top left corner until you see these spikes in the ceiling come into view. Angle the camera down and to the left and draw a fire burst just to the right of the waterfall. It turns out that the poison pots that normally appear after growing the mushrooms still have hitboxes before that point. They're immune to Power Slash, but can still be hit by Cherry Bomb and Fire Burst. As a result, with a well-placed Fire Burst, we can destroy all 5 at once, which will let us skip a cutscene later. This is called Pot Skip and saves around 17 seconds. Practice the placement, since it's surprisingly easy to have 1 or 2 pots left at the end, which will have to be destroyed normally. After Pot Skip, you can quickly clear the second gate with a small slip and a Power Slash, or a medium slip if you are able to buy one in North Rio. The third gate is completed the same way as before, except that you have 5 ink pots instead of 3, making it far more reliable to preserve gold dash through the fight. At the end of it, double jump and draw a sunrise and mash skip quickly. If you did pot skip correctly, the white fade out should occur immediately, skipping the mushroom growing cutscene. After mashing through all of the cutscenes, Ami should end up in front of the mushrooms instead of on the ledge with the pots, saving a few seconds of movement when leaving the room. Sometimes you still end up on the ledge though, which I believe is caused by not mashing skip fast enough. Once we have Vine, we can just leave Tuda Ruins without fighting Spider Queen. The trigger for the intro cutscene is still there, so we have to jump over it while leaving as well. This trick is originally called Chrono Skip from New Game Plus. We can do it with a well-timed double jump and air tackle, which you should practice thoroughly. After leaving Tuda, we just have to run all the way to Shinshu, at which point the 2 routes are pretty much identical. The overall time save is about 2 minutes, 48 seconds for New Game Any %, but it might be a while before a new record gets set with this, considering how difficult and reset-prone Half Blue Skip is, on top of all the other hard tricks in the run. In theory, this should save time in all New Game categories, but further rerouting would be needed. Thank you for watching. Ciao.